Welcome to You've Got This with Sarah Hamaker, a podcast to encourage and equip moms along their parenting journey. Join Sarah each week as she interviews dads and moms like you and discusses the joys, challenges, and rewards of raising kids.
Hi, and welcome to You've Got This. I'm your host, Sarah Hamaker, and I'm glad you joined me. Today I have with me Melissa Henson. She is the Parents Television Council Program Director and a noted expert on the entertainment industry trends and how the impact of entertainment affects children in the American popular culture at large. And for those of you who don't know, the Parents Television Council is a nonpartisan education organization advocating for responsible entertainment. So, Melissa, welcome to my show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Now, as my listeners know, I have 4 kids, 2 of them teenagers who love YouTube. Either God bless or God hate YouTube. I don't know. YouTube's an interesting phenomenon. And what I have found to be somewhat frustrating, because I do vet their shows and they watch in a public place. So I'm always walking by looking at what they're seeing, and we talk about it often because I'm like, what on earth are you watching? And they mostly watch Korean dramas and K-pop videos, Korean pop videos. So a little less the mainstream American stuff. But it's always fascinating to me to see what they're watching and then look at what it's rated. Right. So, and we don't watch a lot of network TV anymore, but I do watch, we do watch more streaming as most Americans. That's where we consume our, online more. So the media ratings seem to be all over the map. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, well, the rating system that we currently have in place, it's a little over 20 years old at this point. And when you're talking about television and cable TV ratings, it's sort of a different beast than the MPAA movie ratings. So I'm just going to focus on the TV ratings. So this system is about 20 years old now, and it was put in place. It was a voluntary measure that was adopted by the entertainment industry in order to avoid any kind of congressional or legislative oversight, any kind of intervention or legislation, that would put any restraints or constraints on the product that they were producing. So they said, just trust us. We'll take care of the problem.
And we all know how well that works. Right. Like when my kid says, "Trust me, Mom, this is fine." I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's it exactly. So they proposed this system in order to avoid any kind of legislative oversight or government regulation. And guess who they put in charge of making sure they're doing it well?
Themselves.
So what we have here is definitely sort of a fox guarding the hen house situation with the ratings. So it's the networks themselves deciding what the shows should be rated, and then the networks that are rating the shows in the first place deciding whether or not they applied the ratings appropriately.
I'm sorry. I'm just like laughing, trying not to laugh over you talking because, honestly, that does sound a little ridiculous.
It is. And unfortunately, what we have seen now, and I'm talking now about American TV, and it's probably a different situation with series that are produced abroad. Right. Every country has its own rating system, and in many respects, the Korean rating system or even the British rating system are probably more restrictive in many ways than the U.S. ratings.
And I will just say that's one of the reasons I'm like, watch all the K-dramas you want, because honestly, they're really pretty squeaky clean.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And, everybody who's traveled to Europe has stories about how risque European TV is, but they have a strictly observed watershed. So anything that airs prior to that watershed is really generally pretty clean. Now, after that watershed hour, anything goes, but pre-watershed programming is generally is supposed to be family friendly. That doesn't happen in the U.S. And part of the reason that doesn't happen is because now the networks are hiding behind the rating system. So what we've seen is in the 20 years since ratings were adopted, content has gotten worse, and it's gotten worse faster. Because now the networks can say, well, your kid saw something they shouldn't have. Sorry, but, we put that TV 14 in the corner, so it's your fault, Mom. It's your fault, Dad. So they've really used the ratings to justify and excuse them introducing more and more edgy content in earlier hours of prime time.
And it seems to me, and again, this is just mostly my reading, we don't have cable in our house, mostly because we just don't want to pay for it. I mean, that's our choice. But I noticed that when we watch shows or we read about them, they seem a lot. All of them seem a lot. There seems like there'd be very little that would fall under the family friendly.
Right. Yeah.
Even by their own standards, there's very few that aren't rated M for mature audiences or 14 for the age restrictions.
Right. Well, that's absolutely right. In the 20 years since the ratings were introduced, if you think back to what kind of programming was available, ABC was still airing The Wonderful World of Disney. You still had the TGIF.
No, TGIF.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
The TGIF lineup on ABC on Friday nights. The WB network that was around back then. Now it's the CW network. But the former WB network used to have a lot of child-friendly and family-friendly programs. They had things like Sister, Smart Guy. Kirk Cameron had a series on the WB back then. Seventh Heaven, so there were a lot more family offerings then. There was a lot more G and PG rated shows 20 years ago than you have today. So generally what we've seen since ratings were adopted is the networks have basically dropped G and PG rated programming. Virtually everything that you're going to see on broadcast TV is rated TV 14. Mm-hmm. And that's true whether you're talking about something like Big Bang Theory, which does not have graphic depictions of violence or sexual behavior, but it does have innuendo. So that is rated the same as, some of the early episodes of The Walking Dead over on AMC. Yeah. So you have this TV 14 category that winds up being a catch-all for a very broad swath of programming. And so it becomes kind of meaningless. And the ratings or the networks are never going to use the MA rating because that's going to scare off advertisers. So even if an MA rating is warranted, they're not going to use it because they don't want to frighten off the advertisers. And there's nobody to hold them accountable for failing to rate their shows appropriately.
Right. And do you find that, it used to be so simple when we were kids, right? I mean, there was some networks, some cable, but yeah, it was a lot easier, I think, for parents to vet what their children wanted to watch.
Yeah.
Or even watch. But now with all the streaming options and then the vast world of YouTube, which is not rated hardly at all unless it's a network show on YouTube. How do you recommend that parents? I know you have a son, a tween son as well. How do you, where do you go to? What are your favorite go-to places to help kind of navigate all this? Because we don't have time to sit and watch every single thing our kids are watching. Especially if we have more than one kid.
Because when you think about, Well, when you think about, when we were kids, you could count. You could count on both hands the number of original programs that were airing during primetime hours, and it was easier to keep track of the content of the shows because there just weren't that many. And then, cable was introduced and, sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, the cable network started introducing original programming. And now with the streaming options that are available, you have literally hundreds of hours of content being produced and uploaded or made available for viewing either over a traditional broadcast TV set or over cable or over a streaming platform or a YouTube type service, hundreds of hours being produced. It is impossible for even the most vigilant parent to keep track of every potential hazard that's out there. And unfortunately, you can't just trust the ratings to or the parental controls that are available on those devices. You can't just rely on those. And so you either have to preview or vet a handful of shows that you're going to say, okay, these are the shows that you can watch. And I would recommend doing this anyhow. Whenever possible, you should be watching with your kid because it's not always going to be possible to vet everything before. But if you're watching with your child and something inappropriate does come up, at least then you have the opportunity to discuss what they saw, gauge your child's reaction to what they saw. Did they actually understand what was happening? Do they need help processing what they saw? Do you need, is this a teachable moment? Is this an opportunity for you to share your own values or why what they saw on the screen was wrong or bad or inappropriate or harmful or, you just use it as a teaching opportunity. But whenever possible, I would strongly encourage families to watch together. And that's the way it used to be, but now viewing has become so segmented and so targeted. That, you have one set of programming for, the 18 to 25-year-old males, and then you have another kind of programming that's being targeted to the, 35 to 45-year-old women, and then another kind of programming that's being targeted to the 12 and 13-year-olds. So I would just strongly encourage folks to watch programming as a family whenever possible.
Yeah, and that's a great, that is a good advice. And we do that as a family sometimes. And we find that sometimes, we realize, our 10-year-old really wasn't ready to see even a PG rated movie, for example. Because like you said, and you have to get to know your kids. Yeah. And some kids are more capable of handling different things than others. And, I was a sensitive child. Let me tell you, I couldn't watch anything horror related, even remotely. And I still can't. Right. I'm like, no, I'm not going to see that. Where, my 16-year-old daughter, she's like, oh, that's the funniest thing. And it's not like she's desensitized. It's just a different, not that we let her watch R-rated stuff, just to be clear out there. But still, even some of the PG stuff, I'm like, no, I'm staying away from that theme. And helping them, I think one of the things that we try to do with our kids when viewing is to help them recognize that when something makes them uncomfortable, even if a sibling is enjoying it, then they should listen to that. Yes. And remove themselves. And we kind of help that when we're watching together. We can look over and see their face and go, yeah, that's not working out so well for this particular child. So I need to help him by saying, I think maybe you don't need to not watch this part or finish this film or something like that. Right.
And that's so important. And that's something that you can't do if you're not watching with them. You don't have that opportunity to gauge, how is my child responding to this? Is this too much? Is this going to be traumatizing? Is this, you miss out on that opportunity. And again, it's also helping the child to identify what they're feeling and help them work through, okay, this situation is making me feel uncomfortable and how do I deal with that? And that's a very valuable life skill that they're going to need, as they get older. When is this situation getting to a point where I'm no longer comfortable and how do I remove myself from that situation? That's a valuable life skill.
It is. And I think we also forget that, images and sounds and the things that we see, they really can stick with us for a long time. I can still remember, some uncomfortable moments as a teenager watching certain things. Not that they were particularly bad. I will say that before they introduced PG-13, I think this was before my dad took me and some friends to see Top Gun. And I was so embarrassed because I had no idea that was like a little bit of a steamy love scene in that one. I was like, oh my goodness. And I thought it was safe because it was about planes and it was rated PG. And I still remember that feeling and going, oh yeah, this was an uncomfortable situation and the rating system let me down. So I kind of keep that in the back of my mind that, we really do have to be careful about what we see because those images and those things can be seared in our mind. And then with our kids, they can have nightmares and, other things. And sometimes we're so quick to go, oh, well, they'll forget about it. It won't bother them. I think we've all been to the movie theater like an R-rated movie or a particularly really, really, like violent type movie, and we've seen parents go in with like young kids.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be overly critical of them. I think that sometimes when I'm trying to encourage my listeners is I think we really need to be thoughtful about this. And I think that with technology in our hand, with so many devices and stuff, I think we have forgotten how to be thoughtful.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's easy for us to err on the side of thinking our kids are more mature emotionally than they are, or better able to handle or cope with what they see. And I think that's a very common phenomena.
Yes.
So even though as an adult viewer, you're watching something and you're thinking, oh, this is nothing, that doesn't mean your child is responding to it in the same way. And to them, it could be leaving a very lasting and very deep and perhaps even a very negative, very harmful impression on them. And as you said, nightmares, that's one possible side effect. There's something that psychologists call mean world syndrome, where kids are more likely to believe that something terrible is going to happen to them or to their family. And that is a real and measurable effect of, kids being exposed to on-screen violence, is that they believe the world is a dark and scary place and that something bad is going to happen to them. And I don't think any parent would knowingly inflict that on their child, but I think a lot of us do that unwittingly by allowing them to watch stuff that, maybe your child says, oh, I'm old enough to watch that. I'm old enough to watch that. Or all my friends are watching it.
Yes.
And you don't want them to feel left out. And
That's
so
my favorite.
Them do that.
My favorite response to that is, I am your parent. I am not such and such's parent. That always throws them. They're like, I said, and I'm like, the big shrug, the eyebrow raise. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah, or and they go to school and all their friends are talking about such and such video game or such and such movie or TV show, and they, but you're right. You are the parent to that child, and it is your job to protect that child. It's not, it doesn't really make any difference what the kid down the street is doing.
Right. Well, we're getting kind of toward the end of our time. So let's talk about, there should be something positive in all of this, right? So what is the do you see any positives with any programming or anything that can give us like hope that things, that somebody's maybe doing something in the right way?
Yeah, there are a number of companies out there that I think are working to produce really good quality, wholesome, family-friendly entertainment. There are a few channels out there like INSP, Hallmark Channel.
Love Hallmark.
Yeah. So I would encourage folks to look out for those kinds of services. There's platforms like VidAngel, which provides the service now. Unfortunately, the movie studios and networks are trying to put them out of business, but they offer a platform that allows you to stream content, but edit out certain kinds of content that you don't like. So, for example, if you're familiar with the movie The King's Speech, that probably could have been a PG movie except for one scene.
Yes.
Where the character uses a bad word over and over and over and over again as part of a speech exercise. Well, a service like VidAngel would allow you to watch that movie, but not have that audio, not have that foul language coming up on the screen. So there are things that parents can do, but like I said, no system is 100% foolproof, and nothing takes the place of just being there and being able to help your child work through what they're seeing on screen.
Right. And I think that's a good message for all of us, to remember that when it comes to the media our children are consuming, we need to be vigilant. We need to be watching what they're watching, and we need to kind of enter into their world and watch things with them.
Yes. Yeah.
And not as not necessarily as, oh, I'm going to watch this so I can make sure it's okay. But our kids enjoy spending that time with us.
Yes.
That watching time. My my two older girls and I they wanted me to watch, I'm on my third Korean drama with them. A series, because they really were begging me to watch it with them. And I'm like, okay, why am I going to turn down spending time with my teenage daughters when they ask me to? I mean, what am I, crazy? Of course I'm not. But, right. But this is also a positive message, I think, for all of us to remember that, we should spend time watching things with our children, because it can just help us to see what they're watching. And also, they just like spending time, even though it might not be, frankly, the dramas are okay. They're not like my favorite thing. But an hour a week I get to spend with my daughters, and I kind of look at it that way. And I think when we kind of put it in the context that it's not always about vetting everything, that it's also about making that connection with our kids and
shared experiences.
And to have that conversation.
Right.
So, anything else that you would like to add from your work, or?
Well, no, but thank you for taking the time. And if folks are interested in learning more about what we do, you can find us online at parentstv.org.
And there'll be a link with this podcast, so you can just click it and check them out. Well, thank you for joining me, Melissa.
Thank you.
You've been listening to You've Got This. I'm your host, Sarah Hammaker, and today I have with me Melissa Henson. She's the Parents Television Council Program Director and a noted expert on the entertainment industry trends, and we are so glad we have it. And I think everyone now can go and watch something with your kids. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast of You've Got This with Sarah Hammaker. Sign up to receive notification of new podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhammaker.com. Until next time, remember, parenting might be hard sometimes, but don't worry, you've got this.